Lena entered the gym, her cleaning cart squeaking with each step as she pushed it down the hallway. It was early, and the gym was nearly empty. The faint scent of sweat and floor cleaner hung in the air, but she paid no attention to it. Her focus was on her task: to clean, to maintain, to make sure the gym was ready for the day. She wore a faded gray t-shirt, navy work pants, and an old sweatshirt tied around her waist. Her shoes made a distinct squeak with every step, and her ID badge, first name only, clipped low to her belt loop. No one paid her any mind as she passed the front desk, where Kyle was busy with his phone. She didn't expect him to. She wasn't here for attention. As she rolled her cart past the vending machine and toward the back of the gym, she moved with quiet efficiency, unnoticed by most. The gym's front area was bright and clean, designed to impress, but Lena knew that the real gym lay behind, where the worn mats and punching bags told the true story of the sport. She began her usual routine, wiping down the ring, each motion practiced and calm. The early regulars hadn't arrived yet, and the gym was still in its early morning stillness. Then she heard a voice. "Yo, janitor getting brave today?" Eli's loud voice broke through the silence. He was one of the gym's amateur fighters, always quick with a joke. Lena didn't respond. She simply continued wiping down the mat, ignoring the taunts from Eli and the few others who laughed along. "Careful, sweetheart. Step in there, and the mop's gonna have to fight for you," Eli continued, pointing at her with his glove. Lena didn't flinch. She kept working, her eyes focused on the task at hand. The laughter echoed, but she remained calm. She had heard it all before. As she finished cleaning the mat, Eli raised his voice again. "Want to take a round? I promise not to bleed on your shoes." The gym's energy shifted, but Lena still said nothing. She rinsed her towel, packed it away, and prepared to continue her work. Eli, now a little more insistent, called out, "Guess that's a yes. Is she gonna mop the ring or fight in it?" The others laughed, but this wasn't a joke to Lena. She simply grabbed her gloves, pulled them on, and stepped into the ring without hesitation. The gym went silent as everyone realized the challenge was no longer a joke. The gym buzzed with energy as the usual morning crowd began to trickle in. Lena continued her routine, moving through the gym like a quiet, invisible force. The squeak of her shoes was the only sound, the soft click of her badge brushing against her side marking, her steady progress. She was used to being overlooked, to fading into the background, just as her role demanded. No one cared about the person who cleaned the ring. No one noticed the hours she spent ensuring everything was in place. But she didn't mind. She was here to work, not to be seen. As she moved toward the towel bin to swap out the old stack, the energy in the gym began to change. Whispers floated through the air as more and more people gathered around the ring. Some were warming up, some were stretching, and others were taking their places on the treadmills. But it was the group around Eli that caught Lena's attention. She could hear the laughter and the taunting from where she stood. Eli had already taken his place near the ropes, his hands wrapped in tape, his muscles flexing as he prepared for a light warm-up. His audience, mostly the usual weekend warriors, was watching him perform. The jokes started to trickle in again, this time more pointed, more personal. "I didn't know they let janitors fight now," one of the guys shouted from across the room, drawing a round of chuckles. "Yeah, man, I hope she's ready to mop the floor with him," another added, clearly enjoying the spectacle. The words stung, but Lena didn't let it show. She kept her focus, finishing her task without a hint of reaction. But this time it felt different. The challenge had been laid out in front of her, and though she hadn't asked for it, the gym had decided she needed to prove herself. All right, Eli's voice rang out, louder this time. "You want to take a round? Let's see what you've got." Lena didn't look up. She didn't need to. She could feel the weight of the gym's eyes on her, and for the first time in a long while she felt something shift inside her. The room had been laughing, but now it was quiet. They were waiting for her to respond, for her to back down, or to rise to the challenge. Still, she didn't answer. She wasn't the type to make a show of herself, not for anyone's entertainment. But when she reached for her gloves, slowly and deliberately, the gym went silent. The room had been waiting for a reaction, but Lena wasn't going to give them what they expected. She wasn't here to prove anything to anyone but herself. The gloves fit snugly around her hands, the leather worn but familiar. She took her time tying the laces tightly, ensuring they were secure. The anticipation in the air grew thick, but she didn't rush. She knew that rushing wouldn't do her any good. It was in the stillness, in the quiet focus of her movements, that she would find her strength. Eli, still standing near the ropes, looked at her with a half smile, clearly expecting her to hesitate or walk away. "You sure about this?" he asked, his tone mocking. "I'd hate for you to regret it." The challenge hung in the air, thick with tension. Lena looked up at him, her eyes steady, and finally spoke. "I'm ready." Her voice was calm, unshaken, and it sent a ripple through the gym. Eli's grin faltered for just a second, but it was enough. He had been so certain of his victory, so sure that she would back down. But now the game had changed. Without waiting for any more taunts, Lena stepped into the ring. The floor beneath her feet felt different than it did when she was cleaning. Doyudi, the sounds of the gym faded as she focused on the task ahead. Her body was poised, her mind clear. This wasn't about showing off. It wasn't about proving something to Eli or the crowd. This was about respect. Her own respect for herself, for the work she did, and for the skills she had honed quietly over the years. Eli, still confident, bounced lightly on his feet, throwing a few punches into the air to warm up. "Let's make this quick, yeah?" he called out to her. "Don't want you to be too tired to clean up after me." The gym laughed again, but it wasn't as loud this time. There was a shift in the atmosphere, an undercurrent of something different in the air. Lena stood still, her hands relaxed at her sides. Her gaze never left Eli, but she didn't move. She wasn't concerned with the noise. She wasn't concerned with anything but the fight in front of her. The bell rang, signaling the start of the round. Eli was quick, as expected. He charged forward, throwing a series of jabs and crosses, clearly eager to show off. But Lena was ready. She dodged his first few punches with ease, moving with a fluidity that surprised the crowd. She wasn't frantic. She didn't flinch. She didn't even break a sweat. For a moment, it was as though time slowed. The world outside the ring seemed distant, irrelevant. All that mattered was the space between her and Eli, the rhythm of their movements, the precision of her footwork. The gym's energy shifted again as Lena moved to the center of the ring. Eli bounced on his feet, cracking his knuckles, his grin growing wider. The crowd had settled into a hushed anticipation, but there was a subtle unease in the air now, something the others hadn't expected. It wasn't just Lena stepping into the ring. It was the fact that she wasn't backing down. Eli's smile faded for a fraction of a second, but only a fraction. He wasn't about to lose to a janitor. This was supposed to be easy, a fun, little show for the crowd. He threw a few jabs into the air, testing his rhythm, and then he lunged forward. "Ready to get your hands dirty?" Eli sneered, coming in with a right hook aimed at Lena's head. But Lena didn't flinch. She didn't even look like she was moving. At the last moment, she ducked just out of reach of the punch, her movements fluid and controlled. Eli's fist sliced through the air, missing her by inches. The gym went still. Lena's eyes never left his chest, watching the shift in his weight as he tried to recover. She stayed low, her feet light on the ground, her body coiled but relaxed, as though waiting for something. Eli, now slightly off balance from the miss, lunged again. This time, Lena stepped aside with a quick pivot, and his jab sailed harmlessly past her, his body twisting awkwardly from the missed strike. The crowd murmured. People were starting to notice. Eli wasn't expecting this. He was the one who trained, the one who was supposed to be in control. He had barely landed a punch, and Lena hadn't moved a muscle beyond stepping out of the way. He gritted his teeth and stepped back, trying to regain his composure. "Not bad," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "But let's see how long you last." He came at her again, faster this time, throwing combinations of jabs and hooks. Lena's eyes never wavered from his torso. Her body moved like a shadow, dodging each punch with ease, her footwork more precise with every step. She read him, his rhythm, his movements. The audience was watching now, some with phones raised, others holding their breath. It wasn't just Lena avoiding the punches anymore. It was clear she was beginning to understand Eli's pattern. She wasn't just defending herself, she was learning him. Eli swung again, but this time Lena stepped in. She moved with lightning speed, her body shifting in one smooth motion, and threw a swift jab to his side. The punch landed hard, right below his ribs. It was a sharp, precise hit, the kind of strike that comes from years of training and experience. Not just brute force. The sound of it echoed through the gym. Eli staggered back, gasping, his face paling. He clutched his side, feeling the burn of the hit deep in his ribs. The crowd's laughter died down, replaced by a silence that hummed with disbelief. Eli bent over, trying to catch his breath, but the air had shifted. The audience had gone from mocking her to wondering if she was actually a threat. Lena stood still, her body loose, her expression calm, but her eyes were sharp, focused. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just waited. Eli's confidence had cracked, but he wasn't going to let it show. He stood up straighter, wiping a hand across his forehead, and raised his fists again. "You've got some skill," he muttered, trying to regain his swagger. "But you'll need more than that to take me down." But Lena was already a step ahead. She shifted her weight and closed the distance, keeping her guard low. Eli swung again, his right hook coming. This time, Lena didn't just avoid the punch. She stepped in, using his own momentum against him. She pivoted and spun off the line, ducking under his arm, and landing another quick jab to his ribs. The crowd reacted, a collective gasp escaping from the group. Eli stumbled again, this time falling to one knee. His breath came in shallow gasps, his face flushed with effort. "Get up, Eli," someone called out from the crowd, but their voice wasn't mocking anymore. It was concerned. No one expected her to land a hit like that. Lena didn't say anything. She just took a step back, giving him space to recover, but she wasn't giving him a moment to breathe. The gym was silent now, all eyes on the two of them. Eli was clearly rattled. He stood, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his stance. The bell rang above them, signaling the end of the round. But there was no cheer, no applause. The gym was still. The only sound was the steady, rhythmic breathing of the fighters. In the ring, Eli had underestimated her, and now he knew it. The bell echoed through the gym, marking the end of the round. Lena stood still in her corner, her gloves hanging loosely by her sides, her breathing steady. Eli, on the other hand, was panting hard. His chest heaved with every breath, and his eyes darted around the ring, searching for something, anything, that might give him the upper hand again. But there was nothing. Lena hadn't broken a sweat. She hadn't even seemed to try. It was like she was playing a different game, one that Eli didn't understand. The gym was eerily quiet. No one laughed, no one taunted. All the usual chatter had stopped, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. The crowd, who had been cheering Eli on just moments before, now watched intently, unsure of what was happening. They had come to see a fight, a spectacle, and yet now they were witnessing something entirely different. Eli wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, trying to regain his composure. He shook his arms out, as if loosening the tension, and bounced on his feet, attempting to mask the fatigue that was beginning to settle in. He was trying to look confident, trying to regain the control that he had lost. But the more he moved, the more Lena's calmness seemed to overshadow him. "You're not bad," Eli said, his voice tight with effort. He tried to sound casual, but it was clear the words didn't come out the way he intended. "But you're gonna need more than that to keep up with me." Lena didn't respond. She simply adjusted her gloves, tying them tighter, her eyes never leaving him. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't even angry. She was just focused. The gym's trainers, who had been watching from the sidelines, exchanged glances. Some of them were still skeptical, but others had begun to lean in, curious. They had seen plenty of fights, but this wasn't like anything they were used to. Lena wasn't just dodging. She was reading Eli, anticipating his every move. It wasn't raw power. It was precision, control, skill. Brandon, the junior coach, leaned forward on the ropes, his eyes narrowed. "You're making it look easy," he muttered under his breath, his tone less mocking now and more intrigued. "But I don't think it's over yet." Lena didn't react to Brandon. She didn't acknowledge his comment at all. She was still watching Eli, her body loose and ready like a coiled spring, waiting for the next move. Eli, feeling the pressure now, threw another punch, more aggressive this time. A wide hook aimed at her head, but Lena was ready. She stepped back, allowing the punch to whiff past her. Her body shifted with such grace that it almost looked like she wasn't trying, as if the punch was never meant to land in the first place. The crowd held their breath, waiting for something, anything to happen. Eli didn't wait. He threw another punch, this one faster, aiming lower. Lena sidestepped again, her feet light as air, and in one smooth motion she closed the gap. With her body turned just enough to avoid his swing, she moved in and threw a quick jab right into his ribs. The sound of the punch landing was sharp and deep, like a fist hitting a drum. Eli staggered back, a harsh gasp escaping his mouth. His face went pale and his knees buckled slightly, but he quickly straightened himself, trying to regain his footing. The crowd was silent. For a moment it felt like time had stopped. Eli was trying to breathe, trying to shake off the sting of the hit, but the damage had already been done. His confidence had shattered. Lena had hit him with a clean shot, and it wasn't the kind of hit he was used to. It wasn't reckless or careless. It was controlled, deliberate. A reminder that Lena wasn't just some janitor with a mop. She was someone who had honed her skills, silently and patiently, for years. Eli took a deep breath, pushing himself back into the fight, but the smile had gone from his face. His bravado was fading, replaced by something more real. Uncertainty. "You good?" Brandon called out from the side, his voice sharp with concern. But Eli didn't answer. He couldn't. Not without revealing how shaken he was. Lena, still in. Her corner didn't even blink. She was waiting for him to make a move, but it wasn't about showing off. It wasn't about proving anything to the crowd. It was about showing Eli, showing everyone that she wasn't going anywhere. As Eli took another breath, trying to rally, Lena's calmness was more powerful than any punch she could throw. She wasn't just in this fight to win. She was in it to show the world that there was more to her than anyone had ever seen. Eli charged at her once more, but this time, it wasn't the same. His movements were slower, more cautious. He didn't know what to expect anymore. And Lena? She was still the same, unfazed, ready. The gym was filled with a heavy silence. Every pair of eyes was trained on the ring, watching Eli as he tried to regain his composure. He wiped the sweat from his brow, his breathing shallow and fast. His ribs ached from the clean punch Lena had landed, and he was starting to feel the weight of the challenge. The crowd, which had once cheered for him, was now watching with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. They had thought this would be an easy win for Eli, a chance to laugh at the janitor and prove his superiority. But now things weren't so clear. Lena, on the other hand, remained poised, unmoving, her gloves hanging by her sides. She wasn't showing signs of fatigue, and her gaze never wavered from Eli. She wasn't here to play games. She wasn't here for applause or validation. She was here to fight, and the fight wasn't over yet. Eli stepped forward, a little slower now, his movements cautious. He threw a weak jab toward her, but it was easy for Lena to slip out of the way. His confidence was faltering, and he knew it. He was no longer the predator in this ring. He was the prey, and Lena was circling, waiting for the right moment to strike. The crowd was silent now, some holding their phones, others leaning forward, watching with bated breath. No one expected this. No one expected Lena to be more than just the woman who cleaned the gym. But with every move she made, every punch she dodged, she was proving them wrong. And Eli was realizing, too late, that he had underestimated her. He swung again, desperate to land a hit, but Lena was already moving. She ducked under his punch and pivoted, closing the distance between them in a flash. Without warning, she landed another quick jab to his midsection. This time, Eli crumpled slightly, the air knocked from his lungs. The force of her punch was almost disorienting, and for the first time in the fight, Eli looked unsure of himself. Lena stood still, watching him carefully, waiting for him to make the next move. She wasn't overzealous. She wasn't rushing in for the finish. She had nothing to prove. Her calm demeanor was her strength, and she wasn't about to let her guard down now. "Come on, Eli," she said softly, just loud enough for him to hear. "Is that all you've got?" Her words weren't meant to taunt. They weren't meant to provoke him into a mistake. They were simply a reminder, reminding him of the difference between his bravado and her skill. She wasn't in the ring to show off. She was in it to win, and the difference was clear. Eli took a step back, his hand resting on his side where she had struck. He was breathing heavily now, his face flushed with exertion. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to being challenged by someone who wasn't even supposed to be in the ring. He had underestimated Lena, and now he was paying the price. He looked up at her, his expression a mix of frustration and disbelief. "You're good," he muttered, his voice tight. "But I'm not done yet." He threw another punch, this time a wild right hook, hoping to catch her off guard. But Lena was too quick. She stepped to the side, avoiding the punch entirely, and in the same motion landed a swift right hook of her own, this time square against his jaw. Eli's head snapped back, his legs giving way beneath him. He stumbled backward, his vision blurry. He reached out, trying to catch himself, but his body betrayed him. With a final grunt, he collapsed to the mat, his body going limp as he hit the canvas. The gym was silent for a moment. The only sound was the heavy breathing of Eli, sprawled out on the floor, unable to move. No one had expected this. The so-called janitor had just knocked the gym's top amateur fighter to the ground in front of everyone. Lena didn't move from her spot in the ring. She wasn't rushing over to him, wasn't celebrating. She just stood there, watching him, waiting for him to get up. But he didn't. The crowd, still stunned, started to shift. A few murmured among themselves. Some slowly started to clap. Others were still unsure of what they had just witnessed. The silence that had filled the room was now being replaced with a quiet, respectful applause. Eli remained on the ground, his body still, his face pale. It was clear he wasn't getting up anytime soon. Brandon, who had been watching from the sidelines, finally moved toward the ring, his face filled with surprise. He crouched down next to Eli, checking to make sure he was okay. "He's out," Brandon said quietly, shaking his head. "She hit him clean." Lena took a deep breath, her hands still resting at her sides, her gloves still on, but her stance relaxed. She had done what she came to do. She wasn't a fighter, but she wasn't going to let anyone dismiss her again. She wasn't just the cleaning lady anymore. She had shown them what it meant to be underestimated. As the gym started to stir with quiet murmurs and respectful glances, Lena turned and slowly walked toward the ropes. She didn't need to say anything. She didn't need to be celebrated. She had already won the only fight that mattered, the one she had with herself. The gym was no longer the same. What had started as a routine training session quickly turned into something else entirely. The crowd, once filled with laughter and mockery, was now hushed. Their eyes were fixed on Lena, who stood quietly in the ring as Eli remained crumpled on the floor. No one moved, no one dared to speak. It was as if the very air in the gym had thickened, heavy with the realization of what had just happened. Lena didn't acknowledge the change. She didn't look for recognition, and she certainly didn't seek validation. She wasn't here for applause. But the silence around her was telling. Everyone had seen what she was capable of, and now they were forced to confront the truth. Eli, still on the mat, hadn't moved much since he'd fallen. His face was pale, sweat clinging to his forehead. His eyes closed as he tried to steady his breathing. His hands rested limply at his sides, and his chest heaved in shallow breaths. Brandon, the junior coach, hovered nearby, looking down at him with a furrowed brow. "Eli, you good?" Brandon asked, but his voice was no longer filled with the usual mocking tone. There was concern there now, a quiet respect that hadn't been there before. Eli didn't respond immediately. It took a few more moments before he slowly stirred, pushing himself up with shaky hands. His face twisted in pain as he stood, but his pride wouldn't allow him to stay down for long. When he finally found his footing, he took a few wobbly steps and wiped his face with the back of his hand. The crowd watched him silently, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Eli didn't speak. He just turned and walked to the edge of the ring, leaning over the ropes and breathing heavily. His hands were still trembling, and it was clear to everyone around that he wasn't the same person he had been before the round started. The cocky, self-assured fighter who had mocked Lena was gone, replaced by a man who had just learned a hard lesson. Lena, still in her corner, made no move to engage. She wasn't interested in furthering the spectacle. She wasn't here to prove herself over and over. She had done what she needed to do. The rest, as far as she was concerned, was up to them to figure out. The gym was quiet now, a deep silence that settled over everything. People were still processing what had just happened. The fight had ended, but the real shift hadn't come in the ring. It had come in the minds of those who had witnessed it. Brandon looked over at the other coaches, then at the crowd, his expression unreadable. "All right, let's get some water on him," he finally said, his voice quieter than usual. He gestured for a couple of the other fighters to help Eli off the mat. "He'll be fine, just needs a moment." As the trainers moved to check on Eli, Lena began to slowly make her way out of the ring. She didn't need to stay. She didn't need to explain herself to anyone. The fight was over, and she had won. Not just the round, not just the match, but the respect of everyone in the room. Her gloves felt heavy as she untied them, her fingers sore from the impact of each punch she'd thrown. She was used to the physical pain. She had endured far worse, but there was something different about this. The emotional exhaustion, the weight of what had happened, was starting to hit her. Now as she climbed out of the ring, the crowd began to stir. The energy had shifted. Some of the fighters were already whispering to one another, exchanging looks. Others had moved closer to the edge of the ring to get a better look at Lena. She wasn't a janitor anymore. She wasn't someone who could be ignored. She was someone they all had to reckon with. Lena didn't pay attention to the hushed voices behind her. She didn't care about the looks or the conversations happening around her. She was ready to go back to her cart, back to the work she was used to. The mop, the towel, the bucket. They would be waiting for her. That was where she belonged. But for the first time, she walked through the gym with her head held high, her posture unyielding. The change had come. It wasn't about what she had done in the ring. It was about what she had proven to herself. She wasn't invisible anymore. Lena pushed her cart through the gym, the familiar squeak of the wheels almost calming in the midst of the stillness that lingered in the air. The gym was no longer filled with the same laughter and boisterous chatter it had earlier. Now it was quieter, almost respectful. The whispers were softer, more subdued, and people were no longer looking at her with mockery. They were watching. Her, yes, but this time it was different. They were watching because they had seen what she was capable of, and they no longer saw her as just the cleaning lady. As she moved toward the back of the gym to gather the towels and cleaning supplies, she could feel eyes on her. She didn't acknowledge them. There was no need to. She was just doing her job, just like she had always done, but now it felt different. The weight of the gym's attention was heavy, and she could feel it pressing down on her shoulders with each step. A few of the fighters were still lingering near the ring, talking in hushed voices, casting occasional glances her way. Some of them looked away quickly, as if embarrassed by the way they had treated her earlier. It wasn't lost on Lena that the same people who had mocked her were now quietly respecting her, even if they hadn't said a word. She reached the back corner where the towels were stored and began to sort through them. She moved quickly, methodically, her hands working with practiced efficiency as she folded the towels and arranged them neatly in the bin. The rhythm of her work was soothing, like the calm after a storm. It was a familiar routine, one that had always given her a sense of peace, even in the chaos of the gym. But today it was different. The storm hadn't passed. It had shifted. The tension was still there, but now it was tinged with something else. Respect. Eli had been knocked out, and though no one had said it aloud, everyone knew that he hadn't just lost to her in the ring. He had lost to the quiet strength she carried within herself. He had lost because he had underestimated her, thinking that because she cleaned the gym, she was somehow weak. He had lost because he hadn't seen the power that came from discipline, from years of quiet dedication. As she turned to leave the back room with the clean towels, her gaze shifted to the front desk where Kyle sat, still scrolling on his phone. He hadn't looked up when she passed earlier, but now, as she made her way back toward the ring, his eyes flicked to her for a split second. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His eyes lingered on her for just a moment too long, and in that small, silent exchange, Lena understood. She didn't need his words. She had earned his recognition. She reached the ring again, setting the towels down and looking at the empty space where Eli had once stood. The ropes were still, the mat slightly scuffed where his feet had dragged against it. The gym was quiet now, a silence that wasn't oppressive but reflective. Everyone who had seen the fight had seen more than just a physical contest. They had seen something deeper, something that had shifted inside them. "Hey, Lena," a voice called out from behind her. It was Brandon, the junior coach. She turned, meeting his gaze. "I just wanted to say," he started, his usual bravado now replaced by a sense of humility. "You're welcome to train here any time. You've earned." Lena didn't respond immediately. She simply nodded, a small acknowledgement of the respect he was offering her. She wasn't interested in being part of their training routine, but the words mattered. It mattered that Brandon, who had once mocked her with the rest of them, was now offering her a place in the gym. It mattered that they saw her for more than what they had assumed. She walked past him, her gaze steady, her movements calm and deliberate. No need for words. She had already said everything she needed to say in the ring. As she rolled her cart to the far corner of the gym, she felt a sense of quiet pride. It wasn't the kind of pride that came from victory. It was the kind of pride that came from knowing who you were, even when no one else did. It was the pride of not needing to prove anything, of simply existing with quiet strength. The gym, which had once been a place where she felt invisible, now felt like a place where she belonged. Not because of the respect she had earned, but because she had finally realized her own worth, and that was enough. The gym was still buzzing, but it wasn't the same kind of energy that had filled the room before. There were no more taunts or jokes, no more mockery. The laughter had faded, replaced by a kind of hushed respect that seemed to hum through the air. Lena didn't look for it, didn't need it. She was used to being invisible, to fading into the background. But today, for the first time, that silence wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't lonely. It felt like space had opened up around her, a space that wasn't filled with judgment, but with the recognition of her presence. She continued her work, moving with the same precision and focus as always. The sound of her mop gliding across. The floor was the only noise in the gym. The squeak of the wheels, the soft swish of the towel, the faint spray of cleaner, all of it was soothing. It was a rhythm she knew well, a rhythm that calmed her in ways the hustle and bustle of the gym never could. But even in the quiet, there was a shift. The gym was alive, but now it was more reflective, more thoughtful. People watched her, not with the same dismissiveness they had before, but with something different, something she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was respect. Or maybe it was just a recognition that the roles they had assigned to people weren't as rigid as they had thought. As she finished cleaning the floor, she made her way to the towel bin, her body moving fluidly, almost automatically. Her hands moved with care, sorting through the towels, folding them neatly. She wasn't rushing. She never rushed. There was no need to. Everything in her world, in her routine, was precise. Everything had its place. Everything was in order. When she was, finished, she turned toward the door. It was nearly time for her shift to end. The gym would soon be filled with the sounds of clanging weights, loud conversations, the rhythmic thud of gloves hitting bags. But for now, it was just her, the clean floor, and the quiet that hung in the air. As she made her way toward the exit, a voice stopped her. "Hey, Lena," Brandon called out. She turned to find him standing near the door, arms crossed, his usual brash demeanor replaced with something softer. His face was serious now, but there was something almost apologetic in his expression. "Thanks," he said simply. There were no grand gestures, no flowery words, but in that simple statement, Lena heard the weight of everything that had changed. She didn't respond immediately. She just nodded, her gaze steady. There was no need for words. He had seen her. He had recognized her. And that was enough. The door swung open, and the noise of the gym flooded in. The chatter, the music, the sounds of the fight that was always taking place in the gym. But for Lena, there was no rush. She stepped into the chaos, moving through it as she always did. Quietly, calmly, with purpose, but now it was different. Now she wasn't just the cleaning lady. Now she was part of the fabric of this place. Not because of her job, not because of her role, but because she had proven to herself and to them that she was more than they had ever imagined. She rolled, her cart down the hallway, her steps measured, her eyes ahead. The squeak of the wheels was the only sound as she moved toward the back of the gym, toward the door that would lead her out. And as she left, the gym returned to its usual rhythm. But there was something different now, something that lingered, in the air long after she had gone. The days that followed felt like a slow return to normal. But for Lena, normal wasn't quite the same anymore. The gym still buzzed with its usual energy, weights clanging, trainers calling out drills, the hum of music filling the background. But the people who passed by her, the ones who used to glance through her, now gave her a subtle nod, a respectful look, or even a quiet hello as she worked. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to remind her that change had happened, even if it was silent. As she cleaned the ring again that morning, she could sense the difference in the air. The loud voices that used to mock her now whispered. No one dared make jokes at her expense. The gym's atmosphere was quieter, more reflective. Some of the trainees who had once looked at her with disinterest now approached her with a different kind of curiosity. Brandon was the first to offer more than just a passing word. He came over during her break, his usual confident stance replaced by something more grounded. He looked at her for a moment, like he wasn't sure whether to speak or not. Finally, he broke the silence. "You know," he said, glancing around, as if he were checking if anyone else was listening. "That was some fight. Never expected that from you." Lena looked up from her cart, wiping her hands on the towel she had just rinsed. She didn't respond immediately, but the corner of her lips twitched, as though a small smile was threatening to emerge. She didn't need to say much. Her actions had already spoken louder than words ever could. "You know," Brandon continued, a bit more hesitantly this time, "you've earned a lot of respect here. More than I thought possible." Lena didn't look away from her task, but there was a flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. She had already known. But hearing it from someone else, someone who had once been a part of the crowd that mocked her, made the recognition feel real. "It's not about the fight," she said quietly, her voice calm and steady. "It's about not letting anyone define you." Brandon paused for a moment, his eyes narrowing in thought. He was used to the bravado of the gym, the loud personalities, the showmanship of the fighters. But Lena wasn't like any of them. She wasn't about loud displays. She was about consistency, about strength through silence. That kind of strength was something he couldn't easily ignore. "You're right," he said after a moment. "And it's clear now that you're not just cleaning the gym. You're a part of it." Lena didn't respond. There was no need. The truth of his words settled between them. She didn't want to be a part of the flashy world the gym sold. She didn't need it. What she had earned wasn't fame or recognition, but something deeper, the respect of those who mattered. As Brandon turned to leave, he called over his shoulder, "If you ever want to train, You've got an open spot here." Lena just nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of his words, and watched him walk away. She didn't need to train in their world. She didn't need their approval. She was already doing the work. She was already living her truth. And for the first time, she felt like she was finally in the right place. After Brandon left, Lena returned to her duties, rolling her cart across the gym floor. As she wiped down the equipment, she noticed a few familiar faces. A couple of the trainees who had once ignored her now approached her with something resembling admiration. One of them even nodded as he passed, his usual cocky grin replaced with a more genuine smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Lena kept working. She didn't seek out the recognition, and she didn't wait for the crowd to notice. She knew who she was now, and that was all that mattered. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about being who she was, unapologetically and without hesitation. The gym, for all its noise and chaos, had become quieter in a way that suited her. It was as if the noise had been a distraction before, and now, in the stillness, she could hear her own heartbeat, steady and strong. And in that silence, she knew she had won. The gym hummed with its usual energy as the morning session picked up pace. But for Lena, the gym felt different today. The noises that once overwhelmed her, the weight of being unnoticed, were now part of a new rhythm, one that she didn't have to fight against. She simply moved through it, like water flowing over smooth stones, unaffected but with purpose. She rolled her cart across the floor as usual, her shoes squeaking with each step, her badge still clipped low to her belt loop, her sweatshirt knotted around her waist. The gym hadn't changed in appearance, but it had changed in essence. She had changed in essence. The respect that had grown for her, both inside and outside of the ring, was silent, but it was tangible, and it was enough. As she cleaned the heavy bags, wiping down the worn leather, she overheard snippets of conversation, casual remarks. But this time they weren't about her. They weren't jokes or taunts. They were just observations. "She was incredible," one voice said, filled with awe. "I thought she was just here to clean," another voice joined in. "I didn't know she was that skilled. We've got some real fighters in this gym, but she belongs here too." The words weren't directed at her, but Lena could hear them clearly. They were softer now, full of respect and acknowledgement. They were the kind of words she had never needed to hear before, but hearing them now, it felt like a validation of everything she had silently known all along. As she finished cleaning the mats, her hands steady as she wiped down each corner, she noticed Eli standing by the water cooler, watching her from a distance. His posture was slouched, his usual confident air gone. He no longer had the bravado he'd once exuded. His eyes met hers for a moment, and she saw a flicker of something. Perhaps guilt, or maybe just a recognition of how wrong he had been. Lena didn't acknowledge him. She didn't need to. The fight was over, and not just in the ring. It had been over from the moment she had stepped in and shown them all who she was. A voice called out from across the room, and she turned to see Kyle, the front desk receptionist, walking toward her. He wasn't looking at his phone this time. His eyes were on her, his expression different. He stopped a few feet away, unsure of what to say. I just wanted to say thanks," he said awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. You really made an impression." Lena nodded, a small, knowing smile tugging at her lips. She hadn't expected a grand apology from anyone. She wasn't there to make them apologize. But the fact that Kyle was acknowledging her in his own way felt like another shift. "No problem," she said simply, her voice calm, but the words carried weight. "I do my job." Kyle hesitated for a moment, then said, "If you ever need anything. I mean, you're part of the team here now. You're not just the janitor." She met his gaze for a moment, her eyes steady, unwavering. The words weren't necessary. She had already earned her place. She didn't need to be anyone's team member to be valid. But the shift in how they saw her was important. Important because she had earned it, not because they gave it to her. She didn't say anything else, just turned and walked back to her cart. As she pushed it down the hallway, The noise of the gym, the clanking weights, the loud chatter, the upbeat music, felt like background noise now. The gym wasn't just a space where people worked out anymore. It was a place where she belonged. She stepped out into the front area, the door closing softly behind her. The gym's glass walls reflected the sunlight that streamed in from the outside, casting long shadows across the floor. It felt peaceful. The noise from inside was muffled now, distant. It was a quiet, but a different kind of quiet than she had known before. Lena took a deep breath, her heart still steady and strong. She didn't need validation. She didn't need to prove herself. She had already done that. The respect she had earned wasn't loud or boisterous. It didn't require applause. It was something deeper, something that had been earned in silence. As she rolled her cart toward the exit, the gym's front doors swung open. A few new members entered, eager and ready to begin their training. Lena gave them a nod, and as they passed by, they acknowledged her with brief but genuine smiles. The gym hadn't forgotten her. The world hadn't forgotten her. And as she left, the faint squeak of her cart echoing down the hallway, she knew that she had left a mark. Not just on the gym, but on herself. That was enough.